Isn't this family portrait just amazing? Look at the delicate brush strokes and the detailed depiction of the different fabrics. This painting was created by one of the first ever female career artists in the 1500s Italy, Lavinia Fontana. Not only that, she was also one of the first women to explore the female form in art, possibly using live models, and she stated in her marriage contract that she would continue her career and not be responsible for housekeeping, allowing her to focus entirely on her art. And this was in the 1500s. Unheard of, right? Lavinia is definitely someone we should know better, don't you agree? Before we explore more about Lavinia's life and art, I want to introduce you to a painting she did around 1594 when she was about 41 years old. The painting is extraordinary and deserves some explanation. The little girl's name is Antonietta Gonsalves, and she was 8 years old when Lavinia painted her portrait. Antonietta had a rare genetic condition called hypertrichosis, also known as werewolf syndrome, which causes an unusual amount of hair to grow on the body. As humans, we tend to reject what is different, but you can see that Lavinia painted Antonietta with tenderness and emotional sensitivity. She saw the vulnerable little girl and perhaps wanted to protect her. I certainly feel that way. Antonietta and her family, who shared the same condition, were treated as medical curiosities by European courts and nobility. I read somewhere that they were even considered animals. Imagine how awful and uncomfortable that must have been for little Antonietta. But Lavinia's portrait of her tells a different story, one of care and respect. Some critics, however, argue that Lavinia painted Antonietta as a doll or a hybrid between a doll-like figure and a hairy creature. But I don't see that at all, do you? So, who was Lavinia? She was born in Bologna, Italy. This is her first known self-portrait, painted when she was 24 years old. When I first learned about Lavinia, I thought her artistic father must have been very supportive of her becoming an artist, which I thought was great, of course. But after some more research, it seems he didn't have much choice. It was more out of financial necessity. Her father was ill and saw his daughter as a way to keep the family afloat. The family didn't have much money, and without it, it would have been difficult for Lavinia to get married. But an arranged, rather unconventional marriage was set up. This self-portrait was made around the time of her marriage. The marriage worked in Lavinia's favour because her marriage contract stated that she brought no money into the marriage, wouldn't do any housekeeping chores, would work as an artist, and they would both live at her father's house. Since Lavinia wasn't allowed to sign contracts, she was a woman after all. Her husband served as her agent and managed all the commissions, allowing Lavinia to continue her work as an artist. She knew what was expected of her, to have many children, and she did. She gave birth to 11 children. No wonder she made sure her marriage contract stated, "No housekeeping chores for me, thank you." This arranged marriage gave Lavinia the social stability to pursue a public career. Her husband, a fellow painter from a noble family, seemed to be a solid partner. He collaborated with Lavinia by painting backgrounds and details like drapery, and also helped care for and educate their children. I wonder how the conversation with her father went when he signed her marriage contract on her behalf. "Yeah, I'll marry this guy, but only if so-and-so is arranged," setting her terms and conditions. Even though her husband was her agent, Lavinia was the one responsible for a lot of negotiation and diplomacy with her clients. What to paint, how, when, etc. She certainly knew how to market herself. This is one of Lavinia's first known paintings, made when she was the same age as in her self-portrait. It's a Christian religious painting called Christ with the Symbols of the Passion. It was intended as an aid for prayer and contemplation. I won't go into the religious meaning of the painting, but it features Christ or Jesus at the centre. It's likely that Lavinia's painting was commissioned for a private chapel or home. Religious paintings were in high demand and paid the best at the time, showing just how skilled Lavinia was. She masterfully composed the painting, directing our eyes straight to the center with the lines from the cross and the column. Not to mention the coloring. It's brilliantly done. You can tell by the color of Jesus' skin that he's likely past or nearly passing away. The strong red and blue surrounding him emphasize the paleness of his body. The detail work is exquisite, especially considering the painting is only 36.2 centimeters by 27 centimeters, or 14¼ inches by 10/5/8 of an inch. Also, take a look at Jesus' anatomy. It's highly unlikely that Lavinia would have had a male model to work from, yet she captured the muscles, light and details perfectly. But actually, she might have had a live model after all. We'll get into that later. Anyone who bought this painting would have been very impressed, but even so, one buyer said, "This excellent painter, to say the truth, in every way prevails above the condition of her sex." What he meant was that Lavinia was an excellent artist, despite being a woman, something not expected of women. Lavinia was a true underdog. Lavinia had to overcome a ton of challenges to become a successful artist in 16th century Italy. Religious themes were considered more prestigious and paid higher commissions, but her competition was all male, at least that's what we presume. Here we have another of Lavinia's religious paintings, Judith with the head of Holofernes. It's interesting, to say the least, two women happily holding the head of a man they've just decapitated. Look at the woman's smirk in the background. And if you look closely at Judith, the woman in the front, doesn't she resemble Lavinia? A self-portrait, perhaps? This was a really popular theme back in the day. About 10 years later, another prominent female artist, Artemisia Gentileschi, painted the same subject, but with even more force, as you can see. Artemisia had a traumatic event that likely influenced her art. I'll share a link at the end of the video in the description box so you can check her out. Back to Lavinia and her Judith with the head of Holofernes. To give you some background on this religious story, Holofernes was a cruel and powerful general who attacked Judith's town with his army. Everyone was terrified of him. But not Judith. She cleverly set up a honey trap, a well-used tactic. Because Judith dressed up nicely and went to Holofernes' camp, where he welcomed her and invited her to dinner, he drank too much wine, got drunk, and eventually fell asleep. That's when Judith took his sword and cut off his head. She returned to her city with her maid, showing everyone what she had done. The people were overjoyed as the army, now leaderless, fled the city. Judith was hailed as a hero for using her bravery and cleverness to protect her people from a very bad man. The story is about bravery, moral values, religious devotion, and faith. But today, we wouldn't think cutting off someone's head is a great thing, would we? We might view Lavinia's depiction of the human body differently than people did 500 years ago. Just as we did with Lavinia's Judith with the head of Holofernes, we need to understand the context of her work. It wasn't until the late 1900s that women artists in Europe were allowed to do live model drawings. Without that, it's rather difficult to accurately depict the shapes and forms of the human body. So, did she do live model drawings or not? Scholars disagree. Some argue that she painted herself, but to do so, she would have needed a very large mirror, which was extremely expensive and of poor quality at the time. If you've ever looked into an old mirror, you'll know the surface is often quite wavy and full of imperfections. It would have been difficult for her to see herself properly in such a mirror. Personally, I believe she did use live models. What do you think? Also, at the time Lavinia lived, women were limited to painting acceptable subjects, particularly religious themes and portraits. But Lavinia's talent became increasingly recognized, and she even painted a portrait of the Pope. This was the highest level of commission. The church was very careful about the messages in paintings, and all commissioned works were checked to ensure they conveyed good moral lessons and were appropriate for religious purposes. So, Lavinia's paintings were definitely scrutinized by high-ranking church officials. Her figurative paintings often had Roman mythological meanings, reflecting the ancient Roman belief system and religion, but I can't help but wonder if this was a way of depicting the human form as a way for high-ranking church officials to get around certain restrictions imposed by the church. This is Lavinia's last painting, titled Minerva Dressing, created in 1613 when Lavinia was 61 years old. It depicts the Roman goddess Minerva, the goddess of war, peace, wisdom, and the arts. You can see her military gear at her feet. What is unusual is that Minerva is depicted in a way that highlights the female form, and Lavinia has replaced Minerva's instruments of war with symbols of peace. The art historian Liana de Girolami Cheney writes, "Although the visual imagery of a female and the overall decor, light, colour and textures are sensual, the subject matter instead emphasises a different illusion, which is a moral message of peace and love." We have linked Liana de Girolami Cheney's excellent article and study of Lavinia's painting in the description box. Another art scholar interprets this scene as a metaphor for Lavinia's longing and nostalgia for her long-lost youth. I'm not sure I agree and find it a little far-fetched. On the other hand, Lavinia passed away only 1 year after this painting was created, so that interpretation might be correct. However, I agree more with the idea that the painting is about laying down your weapons and embrace peace and love. What do you think? If you're interested in historic female painters, why not check out our playlist Old Masters, Women Artists Worldwide pre-1800. And as the first female career artist, Lavinia opened the door for other women to become professional artists. She is the first female master that we know of. She at least managed to get a foot in the door, but it's still a sluggish one for many women artists, even 500 years after Lavinia tried to kick it open. Lavinia is one of the very few women who were recognised during their lifetime. However, she was forgotten for several centuries until around the 1900s. And now you too know about Lavinia. So, get out there and discover more. Be sure to share your thoughts about Lavinia in the comments. Do you want to back other women artists? Then we welcome you to join our mission to make Mikono Art an educational platform for girls, women, and anyone interested in women in the arts, so we can all comfortably answer the simple question, can you name 5 women artists? You're supporting our mission by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing our channel and videos. Or just give us an emoji in the comments. It'll help us a lot and encourage us to create more videos. Until next time, keep exploring the wonders of the artistic world.